Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this hour. It's Monday morning. We're going to talk about a couple of different topics today, not the least of which is the center focus of my talking points or my bullet points for this morning. The Department of Homeland Security has just purchased 2,717 light armored tanks to go along with their 1.6 billion bullet stockpile. It's actually 2 billion, but at this point it's almost a non-issue. Since last year alone, the Department of Homeland Security has stockpiled more than 1.6 billion rounds. Since the beginning of the Obama administration, they have stockpiled 2 billion rounds, mainly in .40 caliber and 9mm pistol rounds. Almost exclusively, that ammunition is hollow point, not range ammo. The Department of Homeland Security has just completed a purchase of 2,717 mine-resistant armor-protected vehicles, commonly known by their military nomenclature as an MRAP. The MRAP is a vehicle which is an armored personnel carrier for all intents and purposes, and is capable of withstanding a direct blast from underneath, and they've been in use in Iraq and Afghanistan for the past decade. What this tells us is that our Department of Homeland Security is accomplishing Obama's famous goal, or now infamous goal, of creating a domestic military force that is as well funded, as well equipped as our military. This isn't a little creepy. This is a lot creepy. And I fail to recognize or fail to understand why our Congress is not all over this like a hobo on a ham sandwich. Why is Congress not holding hearings about the violation of posse comitatus in the domestic United States? Why is Congress authorizing the funding to purchase 2,700 light armored vehicles and tanks to go along with 2 billion bullets? Don't they see the handwriting on the wall like you and I? I want to know where Congress is on this issue. I want to know where Congress is on the issue of domestic homeland security's domestic surveillance technology built into Predator drones, which the United States Department of Homeland Security is now utilizing right here in our domestic United States of America, with capabilities that say that it demands that they must be, and here's their language, not mine, shall be capable, not may, shall be capable of identifying a standing human being at night as likely armed or not. They also specify that they must have signal interception technology that can capture communications in the frequency ranges used by mobile phones, and a directional finding technology that can identify the location of a mobile phone or a two-way radio by triangulation. What this means is that our nation is gearing up for war against the citizens of the United States of America. It means no less. It can mean nothing else. Our nation is gearing up to go to war against you, against me, against your sister, your mother, your father, your brother, your nephews, your cousins, your family, your friends, and your neighbors. Our government is gearing up for tyranny. Nothing less. They can couch it behind fancy language and words demanding that This is for simply no other purpose than emergency and exigent circumstances. But I declare that exigent and the definition thereof will change dramatically. You watch. This isn't an occasional situation. This isn't one incident. This is a plethora, a myriad of incidents that should shake America to its core. The Nazis of Hitler's Germany had nothing on the Department of Homeland Security. They're not building these once in a while, one or two for use on borders. They're buying and building these for use in the domestic United States of America. This should be terrifying every American down to their roots. They state, Homeland Security states, that they're not building in the signal interception capability. Homeland Security's Custom and Border Protection Agency declined to answer questions about whether direction-finding technology is currently in use on its drone fleet. A representative provided CNET with a statement about the agency's unmanned aircraft that said signal interception technology is not currently used. Mark the language here, because it's all in the language. Not currently used. That means it's on board, but they haven't flipped the switch. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, this is their statement, not mine. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is not deploying signal interception technology capabilities on its UAS fleet. Any potential deployment of such technology in the future would be implemented in full consideration of civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy interests, and in a manner consistent with the law and the long-standing law enforcement practices. If you want to trust your liberty, your privacy, and your security to that kind of mealy-mouthed milquetoast statement that basically says that once we pass the law, we can flip all the switches, then you go right ahead. I'm not buying it. CBP, that's Custom and Border Patrol, UAS program is a vital border security asset. Here we go with the justification and the rationalization that this is really only done in favor of border security. Equipped with state-of-the-art sensors and day and night cameras, the UAS provides real-time images to frontline agents to more effectively and efficiently secure the nation's borders. Yeah, right, I buy that like I'm the Pope. As a force multiplier, the UAS operates for extended periods of time and allows CBP to safely conduct missions over tough-to-reach terrain. The UAS also provides agents on the ground with added situational awareness to more safely resolve dangerous situations. They currently have 10 of these drones in play and are buying 14 more. They call this drone, folks, the Predator. Did you hear that? This drone is named the Predator. I leave your own fertile imagination to determine the real, true motive. You're listening to America's Voice. We'll be back in just a moment. You can find this article and many others on our website at americasvoicenow.org and on our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. I encourage you to go there, have your say, put in your comments and your ideas. You don't need to be a Facebook member to do so. We'll be right back.
I know what you're thinking, punk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Dirty Harry gets all his ammo from the battery station. John Rambo, you guessed it. He gets his ammo from the battery station, too. So if you need ammo, go to the place where the guys who know about ammunition go, the battery station. They have one of the largest supplies of ammunition in the area. So make sure you're stocked up and don't get low on shells. Go to the battery station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains.
Another year older, another birthday blood. Not when you're listening to the Birthday Club here on 107.1 The Point each morning during the morning show. Proudly presented by Ryan's Family Restaurant. Call in your loved ones, your mom, dad, grandma, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, nieces, whoever, for their chance to be the winner of a great buffet and drink from Ryan's Family Restaurant. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you from 107.1 The Point and Ryan's Family Restaurant.
I want to remind you of how our government operates in a treasonous format that will affect your every single move. These laws that they pass through the Department of Homeland Security as an administrative agency, as a host of them, once they're sued for the ability by the average American to stop this kind of tyranny and tirade against freedom and liberty, they'll simply push their case to the Supreme Court. So I want to make you aware of the fact that the Supreme Court, which is traditionally construed to be the arbiter of law, is not. That's not so. They taught me in civics class in high school and in social studies class that the Supreme Court makes the rules and everybody has to abide by them. Wake up, you fool. The Supreme Court is no more an independent arbiter of justice than is the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Justice or the executive or the legislative. In fact, the judiciary no longer has independence and hasn't since, I don't know, the mid-1800s. How do we know that? Well, for starters, they depend upon the federal government for their budget. So therefore, their budget is influenced by the legislative because that's the one who holds their purse strings. And they're beholden to the executive because those are the people who exert or execute their budget requirements. So how are you an independent arbiter if in fact you're totally reliant upon the federal government, which you're supposed to rule against? Is that possible? That you would rule against your own master? Highly unlikely. Want proof? Look at the budget, the Obamacare debacle, where the court bent over backwards to find some justification that would allow Obamacare to go into play. They didn't actually base the case on its merits. They went so far as to find an excuse that would allow the court to say it's legal. Despite the fact that the vast majority of Americans disagree with it, despite the fact that not a single Republican voted for it, despite the fact that hundreds of millions of Americans voiced their opposition, the Supreme Court found a way to make it happen. Let me tell you something. There is a principle in play that has been in play since 1798 and earlier. It's called nullification. Nullification simply states that we are members of a contract. The independent 50 states, which are independent 50 united or 50 sovereign independent states with their own governments, just like Europe, Italy and France and Germany and Portugal and Spain. That those 50 states have banded together to give the federal government a very limited and exclusive enumerated list, expressly enumerated list of powers. And that the federal government, when it strays outside the boundaries and the fence lines built by our Constitution, can be nullified by state law, which simply declares null and void on its face. Now, those aren't my words. Those are the words of Thomas Jefferson. Those are the words of Hamilton. Those are the words of Madison. The men who were involved and wrote the damn thing. And yet you're taught in modern civics class and you're taught in social studies that the federal government is the final arbiter of all things right, wrong, legal, or otherwise. And you've been buffaloed and betrayed and you've been lied to for generations. Why is it you distrust the federal government on so many levels for so many things? And yet when it comes time for you to declare that they are null and void on their face because of their unconstitutional or extra-constitutional activity, you bow down and kiss their feet and say, not really. You believe the myth that the Supreme Court has the final say in the legal arena. That's not what our founders intended. That was not the intent of our founding fathers. The Supreme Court was there only to arbitrate differences between the states, not to judge whether or not the states could declare a federal extra-constitutional law unconstitutional on its face, and therefore null and void. In fact, if you want proof that the Supreme Court doesn't get it right, look at Dred Scott. Look at Plessy versus Ferguson. These are cases wherein the Supreme Court later went back and reversed itself. So if they're so righteous, if they're so perfect, how is it that you believe that they're always right? The Supreme Court is not the Pope. They're not infallible. In fact, they're so fallible that they just passed the unconstitutional, extra-constitutional ACA, a.k.a. Obamacare. Was Roe v. Wade right? Even the same justices in play now don't want to rehear Roe v. Wade. And they've already stated emphatically, repeatedly, and publicly that Roe v. Wade did not mean what it's meant to mean today. Now, I don't want to get into the whole argument of abortion, because that's a personal issue that everyone takes a different side on. What I do want you to understand is the fact that the Supreme Court is not only fallible, they're usually wrong. Because they don't operate based upon true justice and the intent of the founders. They operate based upon concepts that they determine how to interpret the Constitution. And that in and of itself, on its face, is incorrect. Their job is not to interpret the constitutional meaning. And I ask you, if they were in fact doing that, why aren't they using quotes from the founders themselves in their decisions that are replete throughout the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, replete throughout the literally thousands of writings that we have from our founders, from George Washington all the way through Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, Adams, the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Where's the writings and the quotes of Patrick Henry? Where are the writings and the quotes from Samuel Adams? The court doesn't quote them. They quote some other pretextual argument that they've gained by utilizing the principle that they can look towards precedent of earlier cases. Precedent is not what this country is built upon. If we were built upon precedent, we would still be subject to the British Crown. They are politicized. They are polarized. They are corrupted. We have a very, very scant margin in the Supreme Court today that falls on the side of conservatism, at least in name. But in their practice, they are not conservative. In their practice, they have betrayed the Constitution to which they are sworn to defend and protect. Why is it that you, as an American, believe the lie and the myth that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter? I'm going to tell you why. Because that's what you have been taught and indoctrinated with and imbued with through school, through the mass media, and through every form of government. Every form of government. Every news article you read, well, the Supreme Court is the final decider. The Supreme Court, if they were honest, intellectually or otherwise, would tell you they are not. That the final arbiter is not 9 men and women who sit on a bench, but the Constitution itself and the writings of the individuals who wrote it, designed it, created it, explained it, and expounded upon it. How did they expound upon it? I don't know where that's at. Well, that's because you're too lazy to go look it up. And so are they. The simple truth is that the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers and the literally tens of thousands of letters that we have from the individuals who wrote, decided, and drafted the Constitution are plain for all to find. No one wants to actually review them because the truth is in them. I challenge you, would you go to a church where a minister said to you, I'm not going to read the Bible in this church. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my interpretation of what that Bible said, but I'm never going to refer back to it. I'm not going to quote from it. I'm not going to use the stories and the allegory and the content and the message. I'm only going to tell you what my interpretation is of it. And by the way, I haven't read it. I've only scanned it. Would you go to that church? I think not. Yet you sit in the pews of the Supreme Court, the Church of the Supreme Court, and you fall victim to it decision after decision after decision. How long do you think it would take for evil to creep into the church that is not based foundationally upon a Bible? Seconds? You're listening to America's Voice. This is the place where you get the whole truth and nothing but the truth. This is the place where we tell the truth every single day, where you'll never hear the same stories and the same explanations from the mainstream media. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Cardinals beginning their gathering at the Vatican to elect a new pope.
Veni Sancte Spiritus, et venite Spiritus, lucis tue radio.
The Cardinals' first meeting today was focused on some of the major problems facing the Catholic Church, as well as discussing when the official conclave to elect the next pontiff will begin. The political blame game continues in Washington over failed efforts to deal with the federal budget.
Republicans and Democrats attacking each other about the cause of sequestration. Republicans claim spending is the problem and must be dealt with. President Obama is urging Republicans to work on a compromise with him. He is concerned about how the $85 billion in automatic spending will affect the economy.
Fox News' Kelly Wright in Washington. Congress is now facing a March 27th deadline to fund the government, but no shutdown is being threatened. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Get a hold of Brian down at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. You can call him at 870-492-4030, or you can find him on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com. Located a half-mile east of Walmart and Route 62 in Mountain Home. My friends over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery at 255-2253, number 2 Evans Arcade off the square in West Plains. Best damn bakery in 100 miles. You can reach Mary at 255-2253. My friend Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 293-0116. Whether remodeling or doing new or custom construction or light commercial, Bill's the guy for you. 293-0116. West Plains Pawn and Gun, located on Route 160, just about a mile east of Walmart on the right-hand side. WestPlainsPawn.com. You can also reach them by a telephone at 417-256-3000. Friends over at the Battery Station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com, and you can call them at 417-257-7799. Also, don't forget to stop by Pizza Hut for an outstanding lunch special between 11 and 2. Salad and pasta all together. You can also visit them on Tuesday evenings for family night. Kids eat free under 12. And Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop, the sponsor of our telephone line. Make sure that you see Wits End Classic Barbershop for your next shave and a haircut. Outstanding, fine young man, and a great patriot as well. He's on the square in West Plains.
The area's best selection of firearms and ammunition can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry. Top-of-the-line handguns from Kimber, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Glock, Beretta, and many more. A wide selection of ammunition including blanks, centerfire handgun and rifle, rimfire, a variety of shotgun shells, target, and turkey. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms and ammunition can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
News Talk 107.1 The Point weather sponsorships are available for your business marketing plans. Contact Cody or Josh at 255-2548 for more information.
From the Pinpoint Weather Center for this morning, it's going to be mostly cloudy. Slight chance for showers. We head through the day, the high 54. Mostly cloudy with some showers tonight, low 36. Mostly cloudy tomorrow with a couple of showers, high 46 degrees. Sunny skies Wednesday, high 44. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
Having difficulty with your computer? Do you think it has a mind of its own? Well, don't be alarmed. This happens to everyone at some point in time. Worry no more. Computer Dave and Kyle can help you out with PC Geeks, a weekly show right here on 107.1 The Point. Tune in Thursdays at 1 o'clock to ask computer-related questions and listen to the web topic of the week. That's PC Geeks here on 107.1 The Point.
The pressure is on. The war is on. You're just not aware of it yet. A group of free speech advocates are rallying behind an Indiana inmate who is currently serving 2 years for online rants against the judge who took away his child custody rights during a divorce case. Even conservatives, liberals, and media advocates are rallying behind this man because he criticized this judge, and they charged him with perjury, intimidating a judge, and attempting to obstruct justice. Because the threat, they said, and this is the Attorney General's words, was to expose the judge to hatred, contempt, disgrace, or ridicule. Really? That constitutes the right to put a man behind bars for 2 years? Yes, his words were strong and angry. Hundreds of emails over the course of a related 2-year divorce case. But did they amount to threats? Did they amount to a 2-year prison sentence? There's a group of free speech advocates, and it's made up of, as I mentioned above, conservatives, liberals, and media advocates. The group filed an amici brief, or an amicus brief, with the state Supreme Court in Indiana, arguing an appeals court decision in January that upheld the felony intimidation charge threatens constitutionally protected speech about public officials. This is beginning to sound to me like a police state where you're not allowed to criticize people in power. You remember the Alien and Sedition Act? You don't. Well, go look it up. Alien and Sedition Act was railed against by none other than Thomas Jefferson. In fact, if you're not aware of it, the principle of nullification, in fact, almost started as a result of the Alien and Sedition Act. Because a law was passed that said you can be imprisoned, tried, and convicted for making critical remarks about people in authority. There were 4 bills passed in 1798. It was in the aftermath of the French Revolution. And they were signed into law by John Adams, who was the president at the time. And basically what they stated was that you could not, if you were guilty of sedition if you made harmful remarks about people in power, from the president and the vice president on down. Now, the concept of limiting free speech was enough so that a number of states, including Virginia and Kentucky, filed what amounted at that time to nullification statements that said, you can pass this as an Alien and Sedition Act, but we as an independent and sovereign state declare it null and void on its face because it is extra-constitutional in its construction. You're not guilty of sedition simply and merely because you have defamed the president. And yet, that is exactly what's happening here. This appeals court endangers the free speech rights of everyone, not just a man who's angry about the fact that his children were taken away from him. And I defy anyone to explain to me how a judge has the authority to take your child's rights away from you unless your behavior is so absolutely egregious and dangerous to the life and limb and liberty of that child. And I don't even care about the minutia of the divorce itself. But when you start limiting people's speech by law and by societal political correctness rules, you have damaged our republic. Were they true? I don't know. And I don't care. And I'll tell you why. Because even if they were unprovable by the defendant in this case, the guy who's now sitting behind bars, that doesn't mean they weren't true. Remember that justices and government employees, state and federal, and prosecutors have immunity, judicial immunity. You can't charge them with a crime for their acts on the bench. It's almost impossible. Because they have construed the law, twisted the law, and passed limitations, barring the average individual from having them investigated and or prosecuted. It's called judicial immunity. It's treason, is what it is. When you can't hold your judges and your prosecutors and your government officials accountable for improper behavior in the prosecution of their duties as employees of the state or the federal government, then we have a dictatorship. We have tyranny living in our midst, sitting on our laps, riding in our shoes. They exposed the judge to hatred, contempt, disgrace, and ridicule. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. How criminal. Really? In the rants that this guy threw out there, he called the judge a child abuser and corrupt and accused him of unethical or illegal behavior. His claim was that this judge taking away his children's or his parental rights and children away from him amounted to child abuse. I'll tell you what, I don't know what behavior the judge used as an excuse to do that, but it had better have been damned serious. If he did it because he didn't like the guy, or because the guy was writing things against this judge's character that he didn't like, then with all due respect, that's unconscionable. And classifying him as corrupt, I buy that. There's nary a judge alive who's not. How can you make such a claim? I can make such a claim very easily. The simple truth is, if judges were not corrupt, they would write their own briefs. If judges were not corrupt, they would stop utilizing the principle of looking at prior cases to find an excuse to justify a ruling which is not truthfully constitutional on its face. They would look at every case as a standalone issue and not rely upon previous cases to make a determination in this case. They would look at the constitutional values and not base it upon precedent. Precedent is when you look at a previous case and you say, the decision of these judges in this case apply to this one. And it's like the game of telephone. You begin to, you start out with a single sentence and you whisper it in the ear of the person next to you. And as you go around the room, that story grows and twists with every person's interpretation of what they just heard. And it starts out with Bobby fell off his bike yesterday, and by the time it gets around to the 20th or 30th person, Bobby broke both of his ankles. He's in a cast up to his neck. And he's accused and committed a crime. It's the game of telephone. And precedent is no different than telephone. It's a lie. It's a betrayal of everything that, and every oath that a justice is sworn to uphold. Ladies and gentlemen, the treason of our government is so woven into the fabric of our nation that I dare say I'm not sure how we're ever going to get rid of it. You're listening to America's Voice. We'll be right back.
Family Fun and Fitness, LLC presents rape and assault prevention classes at Country Cupboard in Licking, Missouri. Men, women, boys, and girls, if you want to know how to stack the deck in your favor in a situation where violence is the only answer, this class is for you. Rape and assault prevention classes are held Monday evenings at 5:30 beginning February 11th and run through March 18th. Class size is limited, so call today 417-260-1006 or register at Country Cupboard, 217 North Highway 63 in Licking. The people who care at Trollinger Construction in West Plains would like to take this special time out to recognize and salute the men and women in uniform who are standing tall for our political and economic freedom around the globe. Let's remember them in our thoughts, prayers, and letters from home. That's courtesy of Trollinger Construction, your complete contractors with a reputation for quality work at prices you can afford. That's Trollinger Construction in West Plains, where they're on the air because they care.
My girlfriend thought it would be really funny to put my computer tower behind the rear passenger of my car, so the guy ran it over. So he says he doesn't have any money to pay for it, and he'd be forever grateful if somebody could help him put this computer all back together. He has 14 maxed level characters from World of Warcraft in there. Really, seriously, who knew that somebody who had 14 levels of World of Warcraft maxed out?
Saturdays noon to 3 for the Kim Commando Show, and weekdays at 7:20 for your Digital Minute.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
You want to know why the country's going to hell? It's because the guy that's president of the United States, may I say, with all due respect, is an economic moron and an ideologue. And he's not going to allow knowledge and evidence and information of other sorts to get into the way of his agenda, which is why we must stop it at every turn and in every way we possibly can.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
On Thursday, we're going to have Doug Enyart here. Doug is the Constitutional Party's submission and candidate for the upcoming replacement of Joanne the traitor Emerson. Joanne is now resigned her seat and has taken her $2 million a year job with the electricity co-op. And so we've got a number of candidates who are running to refill her seat. You've already heard from Bill Slants. He's the Libertarian candidate. And you heard from the Democratic candidate. And now you're going to hear from the Constitution Party's candidate, a gentleman by the name of Doug Enyart. He will be with us on Thursday. Mark your calendars. Make it your business to be here and hear that interview. And we're also, and we've had a bit of a confusion with Jason Smith, the Republican candidate. He was scheduled to be with us on Saturday, and I'm not quite sure what transpired there, but we didn't have him on, and we surely will have him on this week, and we'll probably have him on a Saturday as well. So our goal, of course, is to give you all the information that you need in order to make an informed decision as a voter so that you can appropriately choose our U.S. congressional member. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, Mike. This is Rich from Branson.
Hey, Rich from Branson.
You know, I could attest to everything you said because I was a victim of a judge like that.
I know.
But, you know, they talk about separation of church and state, religion and the government. But you know what? That's a crock of crap because the courthouse is treated like some kind of holy temple with the judge coming out in his black robe like a high priest. Then you got your persecutor and your public pretender. This is part of the same little group of the Sanhedrins and the scribes and the Pharisees who write all these laws, which, by the way, law is defined as a language. And you ever notice how a judge will tell you, you don't understand the language, you need to go get yourself an interpreter?
Yeah,
in other words,
an attorney.
Someone who speaks in tongues.
Right.
You know, you got the parishioners sitting in the pews, Then they select a jury, which is basically the temple choir that sings songs only what the temple wants them to sing. I mean, it's a religion of and by itself. And I'll tell you what, Mike, these decisions that these judges make, I'll tell you what we need to do with all these unconstitutional decisions and all these judges that make them. This is what we need to do with them. Did I make my point?
I think that was a toilet flushing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. I mean, the simple truth is this. We have a judiciary that is so corrupted at this point, and a prosecutorial system which is so corrupted and so in favor of the prosecutors themselves that we cannot expect anyone, whether civilly or criminally, to get a fair trial anymore. Because the simple truth is this, that our judiciary is so corrupted that, and the prosecutors are, their motive is not for justice. Their motive is to declare that they have accomplished a personal goal of achieving so many convictions so that they can move up the ladder. You see, here's the problem. We've put the incentive in the wrong places for these folk. We've put the incentive in a prosecutor getting convictions at any cost. And the ends now justify the means. What that means, and that's a Machiavellian concept, is that it doesn't matter what has to be accomplished in order to prove this guy guilty. The only thing that matters is the end result. And the prosecution has such leeway and so much power in the court systems today that they have absolutely tyrannized the entire process of the judiciary system. And this is not just criminal people. This is civil as well. You never will get a fair shake in court because you're expected to, number one, have an attorney to defend you, which means that, and as this caller has correctly pointed out, these lawyers are adept at speaking in a language which we don't speak. I declare this to be similar to, if you will, the church in the Dark Ages, where only the priest was able to read the Bible, and only the priest was able to speak Latin, and he was the only one who was the final arbiter of the declarations that were in the Bible. And the human population was expected to just trust his judgment and interpretation of all of the above. Go ahead.
Exactly. And that's why these attorneys and the Bar Association creates these things called codes. They only know the codes. They don't want us to know the codes. They changed our language. They have infiltrated into our institutions and redefined everything, including the Constitution.
And that's all my point when I say it's all in the language. Be careful and beware. When you see legal language and you see a definition of what something is, and you'll note, by the way, look at any contract and look at any piece of legislation that's passed. One of the first things they do is they define that language and they define the words that they're going to use that are critical to the core piece of that legislation or the core piece of that contract. And they define it so that you understand what what they're declaring each aspect of this contract to be. And you'll notice that oftentimes the definition of what they determine something to be is not what you or I would believe that word to mean. And they do that for a very clear and specific reason. And they couch these things in names which are completely indescriptive of what they actually are. If you want proof of that, all you got to do is look at the name of the number one tyrannical agency in the United States of America, the Department of Homeland Security. How is it that they are the Department of Homeland Security when they've bought enough bullets to kill every man, woman, and child 8 times, and they've now purchased 2,700 assault vehicles to accomplish that task, and have drones flying over our skies that can monitor you and identify the name, the brand name on a tennis shoe from 60,000 feet? Not to mention the fact that they can capture the signal from your cell phone and identify exactly where you're standing within a couple of yards and have the ability to determine whether or not you're armed.
They have come to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what they've done. You know, when I was in court, after we selected the jury, and the jury went out of the room, and as soon as the door shut behind the last juror, the judge said, off the record, and then he went like this. Our next step is jury instructions, but I like to call them jury destructions. A judge said that.
Yep. I get it.
Hanging.
Listen,
It's
our system is so corrupted at this point. You know, and thank you for the call. I appreciate it. I got to jump because I've got to wrap.
Right.
Thank you. Listen, folks, I have to tell you, the problem is, at this point, that we do not have a fair and final arbiter of anything that is in the best interest of the American citizen. Everything is, and every institution that we look at as a solution to a problem is in and of itself the problem. You can't complain to the courts because the courts are in the pocket of the tyrants and the treasonists who are actually passing the laws. You can't look to the legislative to create a solution because they passed the law that in effect has stolen your rights and your liberties away. You can't look towards the executive because the executive and all three branches are completely and are interwoven in the same scheme of destruction of liberty. And how is it that you're asking the fox who guards the hen house why there are no chicks left while he's got blood dripping from his maw? It's pathetic. And our nation is falling apart as a direct result. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, and I've got to wrap up with a couple of things. Tomorrow is the Firearms Freedom Rally at Remington's in Springfield. It is not requested that you attend. It's mandatory because our goal is to have a couple of thousand people there so that we have media attention to declare the state of Missouri in opposition against federal overreach on the Second Amendment issues. The Firearms Freedom Rally will have as its key spokesman will be none other than Larry Pratt from the Gun Owners Association of America. In addition to that, Sheriff Richard Mack will be there, and he is a member of the Board of Oath Keepers, so he'll be representing Oath Keepers, and he'll also be representing his own organization, which is called the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association, wherein his group goes out there and tries to educate sheriffs about their constitutional requirements and limitations, or unlimitations, I should say, because the sheriff is the number one law enforcement agent in any location in the United States of America. And so you can find his website at cspoa.org. That's CSPOA, stands for Constitutional Sheriff Peace Officers Association.org. You can find Larry Pratt's information at gunowners.org. And I strongly encourage you to join the Gun Owners of America. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the Gun Owners of America is the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington right now. The NRA has, for all intents and purposes, built their advocacy based upon hunting. And I'm here to declare to you that the Second Amendment has absolutely nothing to do with hunting. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/americasvoicenow. This particular program will be available this morning on YouTube at youtube.com/americasvoicenow. If you're interested in taking our TAC 1 pistol course or our cooperative food program, or if you're interested in our reloading class on March 30th, TAC 1 on March 23rd and 24th, I must get an email from you immediately, if not sooner. That email address is mike@americasvoicenow.org. We will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, and on Thursday, we will have Mr. Enyart here from the Constitution Party. Remember, a key phrase in our liberty. Remember this phrase. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Is FM 107.1 The Point, KBMV.
Fox News Radio.